Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Kurian Thomas. I'm a consultant neurologist, Indo-American Hospital, Vaikam, Kottayam, Kerala. Today, we will be discussing one of the most commonly used drugs in day-to-day neurology practice, that is mannitol. This session on mannitol is a part of a program, Treatment Algorithms in Neurology, that is designed by my teacher, Dr. G.R.K. Sharma. And I thank Sir for giving me an opportunity to present in this forum. The objective of the presentation is to review all aspects of mannitol usage in neurology. A brief historical perspective first. Mannitol was discovered by the esteemed French chemist Joseph Louis Proust. It was originally made from the flowering ash tree, and the appearance of the tree led to it being named as manna, and from which the name mannitol also came. Mannitol is a naturally occurring polyol. It is included in the WHO model list of essential medicines. It is a naturally occurring substance found in marine algae, fresh mushrooms, and in the exudate from trees. It is widely used in food and pharmaceutical industries as a sweetener. Because it is not absorbed from the intestine, mannitol does not raise the blood sugar. So diabetics can use it as a sweetener. Mannitol is chemically 1,2,3,4,5,6 hexane. Its molecular weight is 182. This low molecular weight is the reason why mannitol is freely filtered by the renal tubules and where it can exert its osmotic activity. It is prepared commercially by reduction of dextrose. Mannitol solutions are acidic. The pH is 6.3. This is important because the acidic pH of mannitol, when you tend to give mannitol repeatedly as bolus solutions, it can accumulate in the body and lead on to metabolic acidosis. Mannitol is a chemically inert substance. The only additional component is sodium bicarbonate, which is added for pH adjustment. Coming to the pharmacokinetics of mannitol. When you administer mannitol, the onset of action, that is for intracranial pressure reduction, the action begins within 5 to 10 minutes. That is the reason why in neurological and neurosurgical emergencies, you tend to use mannitol so as to buy time before you can go ahead with a definite intervention or as a treatment modality. The duration of action is usually from 1.5 to 6 hours, and hence when you start administering, many a time you start mannitol either 6th hourly or 8th hourly. The distribution is 17 liters. Mannitol remains confined to extracellular fluid, that is the intravascular compartment. There is no plasma protein binding. Mannitol does not penetrate blood-brain barrier. The statement is not exactly correct. There is a terminology called reflection coefficient. The extent to which any substance penetrates the blood-brain barrier, this is called reflection. This is dependent upon reflection coefficient. So if reflection coefficient is 1, then the substance does not penetrate blood-brain barrier at all. The reflection coefficient of mannitol is 0.9 and that of hypertonic saline is 1 liter. It's minimally metabolized in liver to glycogen. Its half-life is 0.5 to 2.5 hours. And in patients with renal failure, the half-life gets extended to up to 36 hours. This is important because in patients with renal failure due to reduced clearance, mannitol can accumulate in the blood and lead on to many serious side effects. It's excreted in urine 80% as an unchanged drug. The supply and storage of mannitol. So you are all familiar with the 20% solution of mannitol, which comes in 100 ml bottles. Our center also has mannitol in 250 ml bottles. There are other strengths also available: 5%, 10%, 15%, and 25%. Mannitol should always be stored at room temperature. Avoid excess heat. This is because mannitol, when stored in plastic bottles, if there is excess heat, it can cause leaching of the plastic content and the solution can get damaged. And when administered, this can lead on to hypersensitivity reactions. Protect mannitol from freezing because the solution is prone for crystallization and the crystals can also cause serious side effects when administered. You should always check the mannitol solution for presence of crystals before administering it. How much mannitol is present in 100 ml of 20% solution? With 100 ml bottle, it is easy. So 20% solution, there will be 20 gram in 100 ml. You should be able to calculate the content of a solution based on the percentage. So if you have 20% solution, just multiply by 10. So 20 into 10, 200 milligram in 1 ml. So 1 gram of mannitol is present in 5 ml of solution. What is the mechanism of action of mannitol? Mannitol, like we already discussed, has got a low molecular weight of 182 gram per mole. Hence, mannitol is freely filtered. It is poorly reabsorbed. So, mannitol is present in the proximal convoluted tubule where it is osmotically active and it will draw in water and electrolytes. So, the reabsorption of water and electrolytes, especially sodium, from the proximal convoluted tubule is disturbed. Then there is excess delivery of water and sodium to the loop of Henle and the distal convoluted tubule, and hence the tubular urine flow is increased. In addition to this, mannitol causes release of renal prostaglandins, causing renal vasodilation also. Always remember that when you are administering mannitol, the loss of water is more than that of the electrolytes. Hence, there is a chance that the patient can have significant dehydration or intravascular volume depletion. What is the mechanism of action in reduction of intracranial pressure? This is by two ways. First of all, there is an immediate effect. This is by plasma expansion and a delayed effect by the osmotic action. The immediate effect. So when you administer mannitol, mannitol comes inside the intravascular compartment. Mannitol is osmotically active and hence it will draw in water from the intracellular compartment into the intravascular compartment. There is hence a plasma expansion and a dilution causing decrease in viscosity of the intravascular fluid. The intravascular volume load increases and there is increased cardiac output. The increased cardiac output causes increased blood flow to the brain. Brain, there is a mechanism called autoregulation. So when there is increased blood flow inside the cerebral blood vessels, they will react to this increased blood flow by constriction. And hence there is ICP reduction due to vasoconstriction of the cerebral blood vessels. Delayed effect of mannitol. Mannitol establishes an osmotic gradient between the plasma and the brain cells. Like we discussed, mannitol crosses the blood-brain barrier very minimally. The reflection coefficient is 0.9. So mannitol will draw in water from the extracellular space into the intravascular space and there is reduction in cerebral edema. So it is easy for you to understand that an intact blood-brain barrier is a prerequisite for mannitol's osmotic action. So if the blood-brain barrier is disrupted, then mannitol's action might not be very efficient. Coming to the concept and importance of cell swelling. In a normal cell, the sodium content is always high intracellularly and the potassium content is high extracellularly. So along the concentration gradient, usually the movement happens. Body prevents movement along this concentration gradient by the sodium-potassium ATPase pump, which pushes sodium outside and causes potassium to move inside the cell. This sodium-potassium ATPase pump uses energy, that is ATP. If there is hypoxia, then the sodium-potassium ATPase pump will fail due to lack of energy, and hence sodium will accumulate intracellularly and there is cellular expansion in a hypoxic cell. So because of this mechanism, when there is ischemic anoxia during periods of brain ischemia, there is endothelial cell swelling, vascular endothelial cell swelling. This endothelial cell, due to increased sodium inside the cell, will swell up and can impair the blood flow to end organs and lead to tissue death during prolonged depression of blood flow. When you administer mannitol, the osmotically active substance, comes inside the intravascular compartment, will draw in water from the ischemic swollen endothelial cell, causing its shrinkage and thus re-establishing the blood flow. What are the indications of mannitol? There are multiple FDA-approved neurological and non-neurological indications. First of all, the FDA-approved indications. Mannitol can be used in raised intracranial pressure associated with cerebral edema and brain mass. It is often used prior to neurosurgical procedures to reduce the brain mass. The non-neurological indications, it is used to reduce intraocular pressure prior to surgery and in conditions with like traumatic high fever. An interesting thing is that even though we all say that mannitol is contraindicated and it should be carefully used in patients with renal dysfunction, it is actually used to improve or preserve renal function in acute situations. So in post-transplant patients, to promote diuresis in acute renal failure before irreversible damage sets in, and also when there is overdose of some substances for diuresis of toxic substances, mannitol is used. Mannitol is also used for bowel preparation before colorectal surgery, colonoscopy, and barium enemas. Some of the non-FDA approved indications during bypass surgery before putting a patient on the heart-lung machine to reduce the renal swelling and to preserve the renal function, mannitol is administered. And also mannitol is used to protect sharp objects when they are introduced into the vascular space. We have already discussed that it is extensively used in food industry as a sweetener for diabetic patients. What is the currently available evidence regarding usage of mannitol? There was a Cochrane review in 2007 which evaluated mannitol in acute ischemic stroke and intracerebral hemorrhage, and they found that though it was safe for administration, there was not enough evidence to support the routine use of mannitol in acute stroke patients. Then came the INTRACT 2 trial in 2015. 2,839 patients with intracranial hemorrhage and elevated blood pressures were randomized to receive mannitol within 7 days, and the outcome was assessed. Again, it was found to be safe, but there was no significant difference in the outcome. But they observed slightly better outcome in patients with larger hematomas, that is more than 15 ml, but this requires further verification. Now coming to a comparison between the most commonly used osmotic diuretics, that is mannitol and hypertonic saline. Many people tend to prefer hypertonic saline. Why? Hypertonic saline compared to mannitol has a quicker onset of action, and you have a predictable, durable, and more robust ICP reduction. Of course, it is less nephrotoxic. And in patients in whom mannitol has failed also, you can use hypertonic saline. But at the same time, mannitol continues to be a safe and effective option for the initial management of elevated intracranial pressure in patients with traumatic brain injury. And also in a patient who has got a severe hypernatremia in whom you cannot use hypertonic saline, mannitol remains an option, and you can also use it in patients with volume overload. Both mannitol or hypertonic saline, they have not found to influence the long-term outcome much. So the latest evidence is brought for us by the Neurocritical Care Society. So in traumatic brain injury, they have found that hypertonic saline may be suggested over mannitol. None of this evidence is based on clear head-to-head trials, and hence the recommendation is a conditional one with a low quality of evidence. In ischemic stroke, they found that either mannitol or hypertonic saline can be used. There was no significant advantage in using one over the other initially. Here also the evidence is low quality. In intracerebral hemorrhage, hypertonic saline is suggested over mannitol, and the evidence is very low quality. Subarachnoid hemorrhage, the recommended osmotic diuretic is symptom-based bolus dosing of hypertonic saline. Meningitis for bacterial or TB meningitis, steroids are recommended, and there is a strong recommendation with a moderate quality evidence. And in meningitis, there was insufficient evidence for either mannitol or hypertonic saline. In a patient with hepatic encephalopathy and raised intracranial pressure, mannitol or hypertonic saline can be used. So you can see that in all the conditions with a raised intracranial pressure, mannitol fares well or can be considered equivalently with hypertonic saline for initial management only in ischemic stroke and hepatic encephalopathy. Neurocritical Care Society does not address the usage of mannitol in CVT. So in CVT, mannitol is the preferred osmotic diuretic, maybe the preferred osmotic diuretic, and because it causes vascular decongestion, improves cerebral perfusion, and reduces intracranial pressure. This evidence is there from multiple studies, but the one I have quoted is from our own country, from our esteemed center, NIMHANS, and it was published in Neurology in 2016. How do you administer mannitol? For cerebral edema, administer over 30 to 60 minutes. The prescribing information recommends that it should be administered into a large central vein, but routinely it is administered through peripheral lines and it is safe. Always prefer bolus injections rather than infusions, even initially or later on, for administration of mannitol. So here you can see a mannitol bottle with crystals inside. You should always carefully inspect for these crystals, and if they are present, you should warm the solution, let the crystals dissolve, then bring the solution back to room temperature and then administer with a filter type administration set, because there might be some crystals that are not visible to the naked eye. Never administer mannitol with blood, because the highly osmotically active mannitol can cause crenation and agglutination of red blood cells. What is the dosage of mannitol in raised intracranial pressure? 0.25 to 1 gram per kilogram per dose, and you can repeat this every 6 to 8 hours. You can go up to 4th hourly. More frequent dosing than 4th hourly might not yield significant benefits. Maximum dosage of mannitol that is recommended is 2 gram per kilogram, and for any weight you should not go up above 150 gram. Always keep in mind that the side effects increase when you administer mannitol above 1 gram per kilogram. What are the parameters that you should monitor while the patient is on mannitol? I'll be detailing these later once again, but the main things are osmolality, and osmolar gap. Osmolarity is a calculated entity. So it is calculated by 2 into serum sodium plus blood urea nitrogen by 2.8 plus glucose by 18. Osmolality is a measured one. So you send it to the lab and you will get the result for the osmolality. Osmolality is the difference between osmolality and osmolarity is called osmolar gap, and normally it should be less than 10. So during your routine rounds, you might always be calculating the osmolarity, but you can see here clearly that osmolarity is determined by sodium, blood urea nitrogen, and glucose, and osmolality will measure, in addition to this, the unmeasured solutes. Mannitol also contributes to the unmeasured solutes. And always remember that it is the concentration of mannitol in your body that determines the risk for kidney injury. So the parameter which correlates maximum with the concentration of mannitol is the osmolar gap, which measures the amount of unmeasured solute. That is the difference between osmolality and osmolarity. So when you are administering mannitol, you should keep the serum osmolality below 320 and the serum osmolar gap below 18. Though this is recommended, the Neurocritical Care Society also suggests using the osmolar gap for preventing side effects with mannitol, but they are not able to recommend a cutoff value for the osmolar gap. Many studies or many centers use varying values between 20 and 50. So like you have seen in the Cochrane and the other trials, even if you administer mannitol and the osmolarity goes up, seldom the significant side effects are observed, but you should be careful. How long can we use mannitol? With repeated dosing, mannitol becomes less and less effective. Multiple administrations of mannitol can result in unacceptably high concentration, and hence the sodium and osmolarity can go up. This can lead on to serious neurological complications like osmotic demyelination. When you administer mannitol repeatedly, because the reflection coefficient is 0.9, even though less, slowly it can cross the blood-brain barrier and enter the brain. Hence, the effectiveness of mannitol will come down. And when once mannitol accumulates inside the brain parenchyma, it can lead on to a rebound increase in intracranial pressure. This is especially when mannitol is stopped. So when you administer mannitol, your aim is always to reduce intracranial pressure. Are there situations where it can cause increased intracranial pressure? It can, like we discussed, mannitol due to the plasma expansion and increased cardiac output can increase the cerebral blood flow. So if there is active bleeding, as in postoperative patients, it can increase the bleed and lead on to raised intracranial pressure. Also in children in whom the cerebral auto-regulation is not well developed. Initial periods of traumatic brain injury, mannitol may worsen intracranial hypertension. Also, the important thing is rebound intracranial pressure. I will be coming to that. So, rebound intracranial pressure. Usually, mannitol does not cross the blood-brain barrier. But if the blood-brain barrier is broken, as in case of injured blood vessels, or over time when mannitol leaches slowly across the blood-brain barrier, it accumulates intracellularly. This mannitol can draw water into the brain and cause raised intracranial pressure. How can we avoid rebound intracranial pressure? Always use mannitol as boluses and never stop mannitol abruptly. If you stop abruptly, the half-life, if mannitol is less, it will be cleared from the intravascular compartment and it is present inside the intracellular compartment, and hence the water will be drawn in and there will be rebound raised ICP. Also, there are idiogenic osmoles. These are some solutes which are prepared by the brain. So when mannitol, which is present inside the blood vessel, draws in water, the brain produces some osmotically active substances which are present inside the cell and counters mannitol. These substances are called idiogenic osmoles. So when you stop mannitol abruptly, these idiogenic osmoles are still present. Their actual effort was to prevent the significant osmotic drain from the intracellular compartment. But here, adversely, they will draw in water and cause cellular swelling. In renal impairment, severe renal impairment, mannitol is contraindicated. You should always use with caution mannitol in patients with underlying renal disease. And also you should monitor the renal function periodically while the patient is on mannitol. So does it mean that if a patient has got a mildly deranged creatinine, or if the patient develops a pre-renal failure, you will avoid mannitol? No. You can always give a renal challenge. We have seen that mannitol is even used in patients with early renal injury to prevent permanent damage. So you can administer a dosage of 0.2 gram per kilogram mannitol over 5 minutes. And if the urine output improves to 50 ml per hour, that means that the renal challenge is successful and you can continue to use mannitol. Again, measuring the renal function periodically. There is no dose adjustment needed in patients with liver dysfunction. Coming to the side effects of mannitol, I will detail some of the most important side effects first before going to the list of side effects. So you should always be aware of the cardiovascular side effects of mannitol: fluid overload, pulmonary edema, heart failure, angina, hypotension, and tachycardia. The mannitol initially, when administered, causes a plasma expansion, decrease in viscosity, and an increased preload to the heart, and hence an increased cardiac output. So, due to the expansion of the intravascular fluid compartment, the load on the heart increases. So, if there is a decompensated cardiac state, then the increased fluid overload can push a patient with incipient heart failure into fulminant heart failure. So you should monitor the cardiac status carefully before initiation of mannitol and also while on mannitol. There are multiple endocrine and metabolic side effects. The patients can have significant dehydration because always water loss is more with mannitol than the loss of electrolytes. Various fluid and electrolyte disturbances that can cause hypernatremia or hyponatremia. hyperkalemia or hypokalemia, metabolic acidosis because the pH of mannitol is acidic 6.3, and when accumulated it can lead on to metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis, and the hypervolemia which occurs due to the initial plasma expansion. So how can a substance cause hyponatremia and at the same time hypernatremia? Hyponatremia is due to two reasons. Initially, when you administer mannitol, due to the plasma expansion, that is, when mannitol, the osmotically active substance, draws in water from the intracellular compartment into the intravascular compartment, there is plasma expansion and a dilutional effect leading to dilutional hyponatremia. Also, in addition to water, there is natriuresis. Sodium is the preferentially lost electrolyte. So there is sodium loss via the kidneys. Both of this can lead on to significant hyponatremia. When you administer larger rapid infusions of hypertonic mannitol solution, it can cause excessive water loss, dehydration, and hence hypernatremia. So it is clear that hyponatremia occurs early in the administration of mannitol due to plasma expansion and natriuresis, whereas hypernatremia occurs later. The other renal side effects include polyuria, acute renal failure due to acute tubular necrosis. The same acute tubular necrosis can lead on to hematuria and urinary retention. Osmotic nephrosis, azotemia also should be carefully watched out for. There is a detailed list of other side effects. You all can go through the listed side effects. I have highlighted the main ones. Mannitol can cause hypersensitivity reactions. This is usually when there is a problem with the stored solution, and there is even death reported with mannitol administration. CNS, there are multiple side effects like chills, coma, confusion, dizziness, headache. Rebound intracranial pressure is something that you should always be aware of and always prevent. Skin necrosis. So mannitol, when you administer, there is a chance of extravasation. If extravasated, it can cause significant problems, including skin necrosis. So you should always daily inspect the administration site on your rounds and also instruct your nursing staff to check the administration site periodically for extravasation and other skin changes. There are other gastrointestinal, hematological, local, neuromuscular, ophthalmic, and respiratory side effects that you should be aware of. Coming to the contraindications for mannitol administration. If there is a reported hypersensitivity to mannitol, it should be avoided. In patients with severe hypovolemia, mannitol should be avoided. In a patient with anuria, mannitol should be avoided. If there is active intracranial bleeding, mannitol can increase the bleeding due to the increased plasma expansion, cardiac output, and increased blood flow to the brain. In a patient with pre-existing pulmonary edema and progressive heart failure, mannitol should be avoided. The precautions that you should take while mannitol is administered. Carefully evaluate the cardiovascular status before mannitol bolus administration, and also during the administration, watch out for worsening of cardiovascular status. If a patient has got a pre-existing hyponatremia and you administer bolus mannitol, due to the plasma expansion, there can be sudden worsening of sodium levels. Concomitant administration of nephrotoxic drugs, especially other diuretics, you should be careful. Always inspect mannitol solutions for presence of crystals, and if crystals are observed, you should warm the solution. Then Let the crystals dissolve, bring it back to room temperature, and then administer with a filter. The drug interactions of mannitol. Avoid nephrotoxic drugs like aminoglycosides, especially amikacin. Tobramycin inhalation, which is used in patients with cystic fibrosis. If you administer along with mannitol, it can enhance the nephrotoxicity. There are some other medications you should carefully monitor when you are giving along with mannitol. These include sodium phosphate bowel preparations, dichlorphenamide, which is can increase the toxicity, causing hypokalemia and metabolic acidosis. Diacerine, which is used in joint diseases, can enhance the therapeutic effect, again causing side effects. Opioid agonists and lurasidone, which is prescribed by psychiatrists in bipolar disease, can also increase the effect of mannitol. In pregnancy, you should carefully weigh the effect versus side effect of mannitol, and if clearly needed, only mannitol should be used, and always high doses should be avoided. Why? Maternal dehydration can occur with a mannitol administration, leading to maternal hypotension, uterine hypoperfusion, and fetal injury. Also, mannitol crosses placenta to a variable extent. It can thus accumulate in fetus. Also, it can increase the amniotic fluid volume. The prescribing information states to consider the benefit versus risk with mannitol in patients with breastfeeding and the give. But at the same time, there is a WHO recommendation to avoid mannitol in lactating mothers. What are the parameters you should hence monitor while the patient is on mannitol? There should be a daily intake output charting. The renal function, blood urea and creatinine should be monitored daily. Serum electrolytes and serum osmolality. Osmolar gap, we have already discussed, accurately correlates with the mannitol concentration in the body and hence the risk of kidney injury. Blood urea and blood glucose should be monitored. Daily you should monitor the infusion site, and before and during the administration of mannitol, you should monitor the cardiac function. How frequently this should be monitored is not recommended. There are even people who measure the osmolality before each mannitol bolus administration, but the current recommendation is to use it routinely, so the clinician can decide judiciously how frequently to monitor. There is a latest update on the usage of mannitol, that it is being tried in Parkinson's disease to prevent disease progression. So the phase 2 trial is ongoing, and hopefully we can expect better news about this wonderful drug. This is a summary slide which details the contraindications, dosage, the dose adjustments required, and what all things to monitor while the patient is on mannitol. You can go through this. These are my references, and thank you. So before we end the session, I will just in a few minutes discuss the questionnaire that we had posted prior to the session. So the first question, you are doing rounds in neuro ICU and the sister in charge comes to you with a 20% mannitol bottle with crystals within. She wants to discard and file a report about the current batch of damaged mannitol. What will you do? So out of the majority of the people selected the correct answer, that is to ask the sister to warm the solution and administer with filter. We should also bring it back to room temperature and then administer. Question 2, 50-year-old patient after road traffic accident developed raised intracranial pressure and the CT showed cerebral edema with impending herniation. Blood urea is 70, creatinine is 1.4. What is an appropriate treatment option? So, mannitol, whether it can be given or is contraindicated. I think the answer is clear that mannitol can be given. But still, you should carefully monitor the renal function while you continue to administer mannitol. 50-year-old patient with dilated cardiomyopathy is admitted with a right MCA infarct. Fourth day, the patient becomes drowsy and the repeat imaging shows mass effect. Patient has pitting pedal edema, basal crepitations, respiratory rate of 16, SpO2 is 98%. What is the safest option? So here you have a patient with incipient heart failure. So if you administer mannitol, you can precipitate fulminant heart failure. Hence, the correct answer will be administer 100 ml of 3% sodium chloride. You are in third year of residency. Your head of the department asks you to give mannitol at 0.5 gram per kilogram to his patient in AC block. His weight is 50 kilogram. The ward sister shows you the 250 ml bottle instead of the usual 100 ml bottle of 20% mannitol and asks how much to give. So here you have a 50 kg person. So 50 into 0.5, the requirement is 25 gram. 1 gram of mannitol is present in 5 ml of solution. So the requirement is 125 ml and the closest answer will be option C, that is 120 ml. Patient with a road traffic accident and head injury for reduction of raised ICP. Which of the following will you prefer initially? 100 ml of mannitol 6th hourly, 100 ml of mannitol 2nd hourly, or a continuous IV infusion of mannitol at 2 gram per hour. I think it is clear that the bolus dosing is what is required, and you will always start with a 6th hourly or 8th hourly dosing, and if needed, you can go up to 4th hourly. So the correct answer is option A. While patient is on mannitol, what should be monitored to assess risk of acute kidney injury? So the answer is obvious. It is osmolar gap. Thank you. Thank you very much.